friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria and today we're going to be talking about some books that I will not hear any criticisms on. These are absolute favorite books of mine that it like physically hurts me to hear someone talk bad about them. They are the kind of ones that I am not capable of having like a good back and forth like understanding conversation with somebody who disliked the book. If you didn't like it, I don't want to hear anything about it. I don't want to talk about it. These books are near and dear to my heart. They're so close to my soul that it's the kind of thing where if I hear somebody talk bad about it, it like makes me feel like they're talking bad about me. There are some favorite books that I have that I'm fully capable of having a conversation about and understanding the other person's side of things and being able to say, oh, I can see where you're coming from, but that didn't bother me. These are not those books. These are, I do not want to hear it if you don't like them. So with that being said, please do not come in my comments and say that you hate these books. It will make me physically unhappy. And I will be very sad, and I don't really want to be sad, so please don't do that. I would really, really appreciate it. But I do have a good amount of books, so we're just going to get right into them. I have my notebook here. I'm down in my living room again. I didn't feel like setting up my lights and everything, so we're just going with the natural lighting, so sorry if it's a little wonky. But I have like 10-ish books to talk about, and I'm just gonna get right into them. So the first one is Manacled by SenLinYu. This is actually a Hermione fan fiction, so it is not a published book. Like I said, it's Draco and Hermione. It's told in 3 parts. The first part is the present, the second part is the past, and the third part is like the future. And so it talks about a time where Harry Potter has died during the war and Voldemort has won, and Hermione has been captured and is sold off to a high members of Voldemort's like inner circle, and Hermione ends up being sold to or given to Draco as a gift, and it is talking about like repopulating the wizard world. So it's incredibly dark and it deals with really, really intense topics. It ends on a sort of like they're together at the end, but I wouldn't necessarily call it like a happily ever after. This is not a traditional romance. It does have a romance in it. Draco and Hermione are together in it, and it is a magical, beautiful, torturous, painful story that I still think about, and I read it over a year ago. It was one of my favorite books of last year, and I still think about it almost every single day, and was so impactful to me, and just the writing is stunningly beautiful and heart-wrenching, and it is hard to read at times, but it's so good, and it is one that I'm gonna think about for like a really, really long time to come. And I wish I had a physical copy of this because, oh my god, but I loved this so much, and it really, really is very, very good. It is dark, but it is very, very good, and I loved it. I loved it. The second book that I'm going to talk about is one that I have talked about 1 million times on my channel. 1 million times. Honestly, if you've watched any of my videos, you all know this is one of my favorite books ever, and that is Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. This is an MM hockey romance with a bisexual awakening for one of the characters. They are childhood friends who have a falling out, and they see each other 4, I think, years later. They went to camp together. They were roommates when they were kids, and then they had a falling out, and now it's years later, and they go back to the same camp as camp counselors, and Wes has always been in love with Jamie, and Jamie didn't know, and Wes comes back for the summer to like shoot his shot, and it is beautiful. It's so cute. I love this book so freaking much. I recommend it to literally everyone. There are a lot of people that I have been like, you should read this book. You should read this book. I adore this book. It is one of my favorites of all time. I reread it all the time. I've probably read it 10 times, and I read it for the first time, I think, in 2020. I love it. It's so heartwarming and cute, and Wes has had a really hard life. He's struggled. His parents really don't care about him, and when they found out he was gay, they really like rejected him. And Jamie and Jamie's family really become Wes's family, and it's so cute. It's so cute. But it also deals with the fact that Wes is going to play professional hockey. This is this last summer before he's moving to Canada to play for the Maple Leafs, I think. And he is going to be a professional hockey player, and Jamie is supposed to be going to be a professional goalie, also professional hockey players. So they know that the summer is all that they have, but they love each other enough to try it anyway, and it's so cute and so good. And honestly, if you haven't picked it up, what are you doing? It's amazing. It really is. The next one that I have is Juniper Hill by Devney Perry. This is another one that I've talked about a lot because it was one of my favorites of last year as well. This is another one that I recommend to a lot of people. This is one that I think that a lot of people would really like. It's one of those that I would recommend to almost anyone. This one is a single mom romance. The heroine's name is Memphis, and she just had a baby and ends up having to run away from her family and moves to this small town called Quincy, Montana, where she takes a job as a maid at the Eloise Inn Hotel, and she lives above the garage of Knox Eden. And Knox is very grumpy. He doesn't really like people in his space, but his sister asked, and so he agrees to let Memphis stay above his garage. And they have such a sweet romance. This is one where I always say it's the small moments, it's the little things in this book that just make the romance so cute and wholesome. You don't need big, giant, grand gestures when you have these actions that really prove that you care about the other person, and it becomes so sweet. And I love the way that Knox falls not only for Memphis, but for her son, and how he becomes so involved in their lives and willing to do absolutely anything to protect the two of them. So there is a small, tiny suspense element, but it's very, very small. But it just proves that Knox is willing to do anything for them, and I loved this. And again, it's just one of those super, super romantic, sweet romances that I want a relationship like that. The next one that I have is Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. This one is a bodyguard romance, and the heroine, Riona Griffin, her family has mafia ties. Her family is the Irish mafia, and she is the lawyer for her family. And she ends up being in danger. Somebody's trying to kill her, and so she ends up having to get a bodyguard, and her bodyguard's name is Raylan, and he is a Texas boy. He is a military guy, but he's from Texas, and he becomes her bodyguard, and he ends up having to take her home to Texas to try and like get her away from the people who are trying to kill her. But Riona is the kind of person that always has a lot of walls up. She is not somebody who's just easygoing and trusting, and she has a lot of walls up, and Raylan really works to break those walls down and get Riona to trust him and prove that he cares about her. And I loved this. I really relate to Riona in this one. She is one of the main reasons why I really, really loved this book. I tend to find myself relating more towards the heroines who are a little bit more prickly, who are not just like happy and smiley all the time, but who have trust issues and struggle with emotions and emotional attachments. And I always loved them, and I love seeing them get their romances and seeing them be able to trust somebody else, and I think it's so great. The next one that I have is Smitten by Lauren Rowe. This is another really, really sweet, wholesome romance. This is sort of friends to lovers. The hero's name is Fish, and he is part of a very famous band, and he is not the most conventionally attractive, and he doesn't really think that people, or that girls specifically, like him. For him, that's all he wants, is someone who will like him as himself and not as Fish from 22 Goats, the famous band. And so he ends up meeting, I think her name is Alexandra, and she is a perspective like musician. She's trying to be a musician, and they meet each other at a party, and they develop the cutest, sweetest relationship that just builds and grow. It's that like first love, wholesome relationship where they both fall so hard for each other, but it's so sweet, and they just are just trying to work out their relationship and trying to figure out like how things work and how they're gonna do this, and how to be happy together, and how to just live their life together. And it's so, so cute. It's just one of the sweetest. Fish is such a sweetheart hero and is so trying to do everything he can to keep the relationship or have a relationship with Alexandra, and it's just adorable. The next one that I have, actually the next two that I have, are ones that I had to include, and they are Sarah J Maas. I had to include Sarah J Maas on this list because these two are my absolute favorite Sarah J Maas books, and I love them. I love them. I see absolutely nothing wrong with either of these books. The first one is A Court of Mist and Fury, which is no one's surprise. Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. This is book 2 in the ACOTAR series, and this book is absolutely everything. I don't really have anything else to say other than the fact that this book is everything. I don't know if I don't understand how we could have possibly read the same book if you don't like this book. It is everything. Everything. And the second Sarah J Maas book that I have is Crescent City. This is the first one in the Crescent City series, House of Earth and Blood. This book had such an impact on me, on my life. I read this in 2020. It was one of my favorite books of 2020. I want a tattoo inspired by this book. I have stickers everywhere with quotes from this book, and this is my favorite Sarah J Maas book. It is everything. It was so impactful to me, and I heard so many people talking about how it's so boring except for like the last 100 pages, and I don't understand. I don't understand. This book did not bore me for a second. This is almost 800 pages or over 800 pages. I've probably read it a good 8-9 times at this point. I read it all the time, and I cry every time, and I am intrigued and encapsulated and cannot put it down every single time that I read it, and it blows my mind every time. I am not expecting it. I discover new things from the book. I have new feelings and emotions each time that I read it, and I still get that same giddy feeling that I got the first time that I was reading it. I love Bryce. I love the way that her grief is dealt with in this book, and I love the fact that her and Danica and their friendship is so impactful to her, and how they are each other's family. They are each other's family, and this book does not have a lot of romance in it. There is no steam in it whatsoever, and it's not the romance that does this for me. It is Bryce and her character and the adventure and the discovery that she goes on, and I love it. Okay, I have 2 left. The first one that I have is Always Only You by Chloe Leese. This one was my first Chloe Leese book, and this one was so impactful to me because this was the first book that I read that I really saw somebody get a relationship that I would want who had a chronic illness. I read this book around the time where I was really, really struggling with getting diagnosed and figuring things out and still having really, really bad days more often than not while I was trying to like get a handle on it. And I still have bad days, but they, knock on wood, for the past while, I've had more good days than bad days. And that's not always the case, and I know that that's not always going to be the case, but I've been very lucky recently that the things that I'm doing to help my body are working. But when I first read this book, the good days very, very, very much were minimal compared to the bad days that I would have, and I would be so depressed and just struggling with things. And reading this book and seeing somebody who had a chronic illness, even if it wasn't the same as mine, seeing somebody who experienced some of the same symptoms that I had and the feelings that I was having that she was explaining, it was so impactful. It was so impactful, and I loved it so freaking much. And I've loved every single Chloe Lease book that I've read. I think that it is so amazing what she's doing in making sure that people like me who have these chronic illnesses or disabilities or anything like that are able to be excited reading a romance and saying, hey, my life could be like that. I could have a relationship like that. And I love it. I love it. And I'm very happy that Chloe Lease is doing that. And I hope that there are more authors who will do that and take the time to understand the illnesses and write them into their books. Speaking of, another one for the same sort of reason is Real by Kennedy Ryan. This is the last book that I have on this list, and this is another one where this is an epic romance, an epic story, and it is a forbidden romance about a actress who gets cast in a movie and has a relationship with the director of the movie, but it is a brilliant, beautiful story. It is my favorite Kennedy Ryan book, and it is so beautifully written. When I read this book, I highlighted so many things. I wrote notes in the margins. I cried during this book, which is very rare. I've cried during maybe 5 books in my entire life, and this is one of them, and Crescent City is one of them, like I said. But this book, I was so overcome by the way that Canon, the hero, felt about the heroine. And the heroine in this book also has a chronic illness. She has lupus, and the way that Canon talks about life and emotion and love and beauty is just so passionate and gorgeous and hopeful. And I finished this book and I felt so hopeful about life, and I love it. And I am trying to make my mom read it also, because my mom has a chronic illness as well, and I think that she would love it as well. And I think that everyone should read it because it is so freaking good. But that's the last one that I have. That's like 9, I think, that I mentioned. But I absolutely love these books, and like I said in the beginning, please don't come into my comments and tell me how much you hate them. It would really hurt my feelings, so please don't do that. But if you want to talk about how much you love these books, I would love to hear about that. You're always free to talk about how much you love the books in my comments. But that's gonna be it for this video, so please like it if you liked it, and subscribe so you can see more content from me, and I hope that you have the absolute best day.